I'm going to say, well, first of all, for sure, the Bible. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong in investing and dealing with people. And there's just a lot of, generational wisdom in there that helps you handle tough situations, period. Yeah. And so it helps keep you grounded, helps keep you in a good perspective on life. So when tough things happen, you don't let it overwhelm you.
From cornfields to high-rises, office to industrial, houses to hotels, and every other asset class in real estate, we cover the people, the projects, and the profit. Welcome to the Investing in Iowa show. This show is for go-doers, action takers, and business owners. It's for people like you who are sick of Uncle Sam taking a huge bite of your apple. If you're looking to get ahead of what's taking place in Iowa, learn who is doing what, and how you can get in on the action, you're in the right place. Hosted by Neil Timmins, an Iowa native who has been involved in over $300 million in real estate right here in Iowa. Recording in studio from West Des Moines. Here's your host, Neil Timmins.
I've got Derek Vander Veen here on the show. Derek, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Neil. Appreciate you having me on.
I'm excited you're here. Say, for the audience's sake, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
So, like you said, my name is Derek Vander Veen. I do part-time investing in single-family real estate, which is single-family homes and duplexes. And then for my day job, I do commercial real estate finance. I'm in business development and capital markets. And that's where my primary focus is throughout the day. And then I'm a dad as well and have a wife. And so a family man in the evenings as best I can be. And just running kids from one activity to another and, trying to take care of things at home.
Where are you from originally?
So I grew up in a small town in northwest Iowa. The town itself is called Harris. I don't know that a lot of people are going to know where that's at. If you know where the Okoboji Spirit Lake area is, about 15 minutes west of there. I grew up on a dairy farm, lived that traditional dairy farmer son's life where my first job was on the farm, and that remained basically through high school. I was the kid that all my buddies, whenever it would be a snow day at school, they'd be excited because that meant they got to stay home and take a day off, where I was never happy about snow days because that meant I had to go out and milk cattle in 10 below weather because nobody could get to the farm to pull their milking shift. So that's how I kind of grew up and where I got my start.
You have siblings?
I have an older sister, a younger brother, and I do have two older step siblings as well.
All right. So you leave the farm. What do you do after high school?
So went to Northern Iowa for a degree in finance because growing up, again, kind of understood that the farming lifestyle was not something that I aspired to continue. The 24/7 nature of working with dairy cattle just didn't appeal to me. So decided that the town banker always looked like they were well polished. Everyone knew them. They were well liked. So I asked around about where going for a bank type job where you would want to go to get a finance degree, and everyone that I spoke with recommended Northern Iowa, a good business program. So I went to Northern Iowa intent of working in banking, and then spoke with an upperclassman when I was studying at the business building one day, and he informed me of the real estate program and how it was basically an additional semester of courses to be able to get a second major. And that's where I got tipped off to real estate to start, and kind of went down that path for a little bit. Decided that I liked it, took an internship with a company out of Cedar Rapids, and decided that that was the path I preferred over finance and banking per se. Even though I'm in commercial real estate finance, my focus day to day is more around relationship and the real estate component, not doing the lending.
And so, all right, so you graduate from UNI. Kind of walk me forward in terms of what you do. Walk me forward. What would you do? Where'd you graduate and where'd you go from?
Sure. So I went basically the day after I graduated at Northern Iowa. I moved to Kansas City to take a job in commercial real estate servicing. There was a former classmate who was working at a company down there. This was May of 2011. So there were not a lot of real estate jobs at that time. I was excited for the opportunity to go to Kansas City. I thought that sounded like a neat place to try. I had not been there before. So I'm trying to experience life a little bit by moving somewhere a little bit more of a urban scene. And so started there for a couple of years. When I moved into that role, it was one that I informed my boss, and it was a small company, so I knew basically the head of the company as well, and informed them that I had an interest in kind of understanding all aspects of that business, and that I wanted to take a little bit of time in each different department, basically perform my own rotational, and hopefully one day run the company. Your aspirations when you graduate college and 10, 12, 20 years out of college can change. But at that time, that was the focus, was to try and get a well-rounded experience and then have everything I needed to be able to run a company like that. And ultimately ended up with something a little bit different, but it benefited having all those different operational focuses in the business development role that I'm in today, which is out promoting our product to third-party clients. And then a few other things have happened to kind of shift my role into a capital markets role, whereby our borrower clients are in need of financing that our bank, which is Truist Bank, it's the seventh largest bank in the nation, but nobody in the Midwest really knows about it because it's really only a Southeast focused bank. It was a merger of two banks, SunTrust and BB&T. And so it doesn't really come across many people in Iowa's purview, but it's the company that I work for. When the bank doesn't have a loan solution, then my team goes out and we find financing with other partners to get those deals done for our borrower clients.
Define, in case anybody doesn't know what capital markets happens to be, the words and then kind of the world you play in, maybe size-wise too, from a scope. What does that look like?
So capital markets, I think, can mean multiple things from the perspective of how our firm uses it. It's one that we go out and we understand what financing options are available to somebody who owns real estate, whether they want to sell in 1 to 2 years, whether they want to hold it for the next 30, whether they're most focused on getting the tightest rate possible and not worrying about flexibility in their loan agreement, or if somebody that wants a lot of flexibility to be able to make modifications or withdraw some additional money later in the life of the project if they've got some work to be done on the asset. Our job as capital markets experts are to understand what options are out there, where do things price, what kind of terms should be expected for these borrowers, and what do those borrowers need to provide in order to get the best loan terms possible, and how can they position themselves to be in a good spot. So that's what we consider to be capital markets. I know there's other kind of ways to describe it, but that's how we function.
Typical size or size range would be what?
So deals we work on range from as little as $1 to $2 million up to hundreds of millions of dollars, because we have different client types with different asset types with different business plans. And so we have a very large network of life insurance company correspondents. We work with Freddie, Fannie, and Ginnie Mae, HUD on agency financing. We have CMBS partners. We have bridge or debt fund partners. And so we have a lot of different relationships across a lot of different products to be able to provide solutions to, again, anybody, whatever that loan size, whatever that business plan, whatever the story is, whatever the market is, we've got somebody who can cover it.
What I find interesting, and everything you describe is interesting, and we utilize that in the commercial space, but everything you describe has nothing to do with single family homes, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And
No,
I find it's interesting because at some point you decided we're going to invest, and you chose the single family asset space.
Yep, that's a great delineation between my day job and investing, because you're right. There's not a lot of overlap. Sure, it's real estate. Sure, it's numbers based. You're still looking to make certain return hurdles and things, but as our borrowers are on the commercial side. But no, what I do day to day in my home office does not impact how I operate as a investor of single family homes. So that interest started when I was at Northern Iowa still, kind of had some different connections. And that's one of the beautiful things about college. I know a lot of people say the value of a college degree is not really there. They're very expensive. They're just a piece of paper in some ways. But for me, the value of college was the connections that I made and the ideas that came to me through those connections. And some of those connections I still bounce ideas off with today. I connect with professors that I had at that time who know others that I don't know yet to help broaden my network. So really for me, college was a networking tool, and that's what it turned out to be. And then when I was in college, again, I had some ideas from some people who had talked about they were going to buy a duplex and live in one side and rent out the other. And that was the first I'd ever heard of that concept. I thought it was interesting. I ended up being referred to the book. I know you've heard about this one before, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad from Robert Kiyosaki. So I read that, felt like my eyes kind of opened up to the idea of owning a duplex and living in one side and renting the other and snowballing that over time. And so when I moved to Kansas City, I lived in an apartment, and my plan was not to have to sign another lease at an apartment, but instead to buy a duplex after I've had a chance to look at the market, live in one side, rent out the other. Again, this was 2011. And so at that time, single family homes were very cheap relative to what they are today. We had just gone through the '08 financial crisis. Nobody wanted homes. People were doing what they could to give away their home. They wouldn't get a single bid, let alone multiple offers on, nice homes. However, duplexes were trading at least as high as they had been during the '08 crisis. Obviously, that's because they're based more on investor review of financials, and rent was going up because single family homes were not popular anymore. Nobody wanted to buy a asset that was losing value. Foreclosures, it was a scary topic.
Displaced person from a foreclosure is the newest renter.
Exactly. So I was not having any success finding a duplex that seemed to make sense. So my agent said, well, why don't you consider buying a single family home, live in it for a year and fix it up. And then after that, buy another and turn that one into your first rental property, which again was very intriguing. Started looking at those, ended up finding a 2-bed. And when I say we, I'm married. My wife and I have been doing this together from the beginning, our high school sweethearts. So from the beginning of the real estate journey, she's been there. So we found a 2-bed, 1-bath home. It's a little over 800 square feet. And it was $68,000. So with a fully fenced yard and everything, right? And 1-stall attached garage, which at that time was still a little scary because there was plenty of that around. And so it was like, do I buy this one? Yeah, that was market. So it didn't seem so amazing at that time. Obviously, looking back, you wish you would have had more of those opportunities, or you would have picked up more of those opportunities. But so we bought that first house, and I didn't even grow up on a farm. I didn't know a whole lot when it came to working on houses. I was more of an animal husbandry person. My dad was kind of grooming me to understand how cattle operate. So I didn't know a lot about, again, fixing a leaky sink or taking care of flooring that wasn't up to par. So bought that house, a little nerve-wracking, kind of started to have doubts because it was a situation of I can't do much. Like if I have to hire everything done, and I started to get my first taste of what does it cost to have a plumber come and do anything, fix your leaky pipe or what have you. So I started to question whether or not this was a business we could be successful in. However, I met an individual, and long story short, this individual was a Northern Iowa alum. He came from a company in Kansas City to interview me for an internship when I was still a junior. He was great to interview with, but I had a return internship with the company that I had taken a semester off internship with earlier for the summer. So I told them I can't commit to a 9-month internship. I can only do 6 months because the summer's already been committed to. But I would love to come work for you for 6 months, and I'll give you 110%. And he appreciated that, but he couldn't give me the job because he needed somebody there for the full 9 months. Now, fast forward, I saw him at an industry conference that was in Kansas City, reconnected, and found out that he was turning his first home that he had bought a couple of years earlier into a rental and moving into a new one. So I offered him free labor to sit beside him, learn. And I told him, as long as you're not making me push brooms and roll paint rollers, I'll work for free. Just teach me something. And he accepted that offer, and he gave me an amazing education. He was very handy. He grew up working construction. And so turned out he was a really good person too. So he's become one of my best friends to this day. What started to be a business connection became a lifelong friendship. And so that's where I gained some skills. And by the end of that year of living in that home, I realized I did have what I needed to give this a go. And again, I had the ability to watch him turn his first home into a rental, have his first tenants show up. And so I just really was fortunate to land in that situation to be able to shadow him and learn from him. That's why we ended up turning our first home into a rental, buying a foreclosure, because even in 2012, when we bought our second one, there were still foreclosures to be found at rock bottom prices. So we bought a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-stall garage home for like $82,000 or something like that at that point. So again, it was still a little scary then, but we were able to make that transition into our second home. And that's kind of what kicked off the business plan of one a year for the first 10 years. And then we're going to reassess and obviously have to maintain a day job through this. Both my wife and I had to, because that's the only way we made the numbers work. We can't live off of a single home's rental income yet. And so we're going to keep this rolling for a couple of years, never bring on too much at once, because again, with all the different things we were focused on, if we bought 10 properties, we may decide this is too much, we're burnt out, we're out. And there's a book called Psychology of Money, and it kind of hits on this about the way to win the money game is to just stay in it, to never just get burnt out by it, to never put in too big of a bet that you lose your shirt and therefore you can't continue. If you stay in the game, time will be your friend and you will ultimately win, whether you made great decisions or good decisions or just okay decisions through that process. And so that's kind of the way we approached it. And 1 year has worked out. A couple of years we've been able to add 2 just because opportunities presented themselves. And so we've got 1 or 2 a year for the last 13 years now. And again, we've never felt we've gotten to the point where too much came on at any one point. We've been able to kind of grow with the business in terms of how we've structured our time outside of our 9 to 5s. And so at this point, we're able to say that we're still investing. We bought 1 in 24. Now we're into 25. So the thought is sometime in this next calendar year, we'll hopefully have another one and continue the business plan, because we did the 10-year. We decided that it's a good plan for us. We want to continue it, but we don't want to get any bigger yet. We're still not to a point where we could say we're out of the day job. And we're fully focused on real estate.
Hey, Iowa investors, this is Ava Bautkamp, Chief of Staff at Legacy Impact Investors. Have you thought about adding real estate to your portfolio but don't have the time or desire to play landlord? At Legacy Impact Investors, we do the heavy lifting. Our team finds the deals, manages the properties, and handles all the day-to-day operations. Our select group of qualified investors co-invest with us, gaining ownership equity without opening a tenant email or responding to a maintenance call. They just share in the income, appreciation, and tax benefits. These opportunities aren't for everyone. They are for qualified, accredited investors only. If you want to learn more, please visit legacyimpactinvestors.com to apply.
How do you finance these as you go along?
So the first one was FHA financing. It was an owner-occupied home. We put down 5%. We had PMI. We were fortunate to have gotten a financial gift from family as like a congratulations on purchasing your first home, to the point where we were able to pay down. We used that money then to pay down the balance, so we didn't end up having to pay PMI because we got to the 20%. Again, it was a $60,000 home, so it didn't take too much. And from there, second home, again, we bought with an FHA loan, and we found out that we could still purchase the homes, because the second home, we ended up having our first child in, and it's very difficult to move out of that home. Obviously, you've got a lot more going on, a lot more to think about. Property was a straight investment purchase, but we did find that you could still purchase those with 30-year fixed rate money on an FHA loan. You had to put it in your personal name, couldn't put it in the business name, but you could do that. And so for the first 10 properties, that's how we did it. We put a fixed rate 30-year money on it through the FHA lender, a banker that's down in Kansas City that always was very responsive, very informative, great to work with. So we never had any questions about, how do we go about with the next one, until we found out that 10 is the max you can put on your name with FHA financing. And so on the 11th one, we did a little bit of research locally, and we're fortunate to find a group here. We work with Iowa Trust and Savings Bank, a guy named Jason Toole. He's been our commercial lender now for the last several properties. We do have one other bank that we kind of diversified a little, because we don't want to only have one bank, because you may know the banks can occasionally decide that they're no longer financing real estate. And we don't find ourselves in a situation that our only banking relationship has just shut off the spigot and we have to refi, and now we got to go out to market and find. So we wanted to have a second option. So we do have one other bank that we work with as well. But that's our primary financing tool today. And we put these on 5-year fixed, 25-year AM deals, and then they refi every 5 years.
What's the thought process behind the commercial versus a DSCR with a 30-year fixed rate?
So that's just kind of the product that we were suggested to take, and the numbers made sense. And honestly, at the time, I was contemplating putting more of our properties on the 5-year 25, because again, rates were all seemingly going down. Because when we started this, we were in 2021. So rates were starting to really bottom, but come 2021, 2022 did bottom. And so we were thinking maybe we take all these 4% fixed rate loans and turn them into 2.9% floating rate loans. And so we were actually thinking about that for all of our properties, which fortunately had another person who, a great friend, connected with that's here in Des Moines, and he's an investor of duplexes. He gave the advice, do not get rid of those 30-year fixed rate mortgages. He's like, keep those as long as you can, which we're very grateful for his advice now, and glad we followed it, because it's looking like it's going to pay off now. But that's actually part of the reason we started in that, was because we thought, hey, rates are floating down. We want to be able to have the flexibility to get out. And it's also partly an educational thing. Like I'm not familiar with the product that you referenced from the DSCR for the 30-year fixed outside of the FHA product. So that's a piece of it too. And again, this comes back to learning a lot continually, right? Like 13 years in doesn't mean we know everything. We're still having conversations with people that know more. I'm pointing at you, people that know more than we do about financing of this product. I know a lot about how we could finance a commercial building, because that's what I do day in and day out with my day job. But I actually don't know as much about how to finance single family. I've leveraged relationships that we have with, like I said, my banking partner and others. And that's kind of the path that we were pointed to, but always open to understanding other options and learning about what other tricks of the trade are out there, because we're definitely still new. We feel like we're still newbies to this industry.
Nobody has it figured out. I always say, you think you got to figure it out in this business, in this industry, just go to work tomorrow and you'll learn you don't.
Yeah. Which is what keeps it interesting, of course. You don't want to know it all in the first 10 years. Then we get old.
Yeah. How you manage everything 100% yourself, the two of you?
We do. So we have 4 properties that are in Kansas City, because that's where we started. And then once we moved from Kansas City to Des Moines back in 2017, we retained those properties and actually tried to self-manage them. At first, I was driving down there once a week for work, doing one night down there, 2 days, one night. And so I was able to kind of address things. That got to be a little bit strenuous. Things would happen that I wasn't going to be back in town for 4 days, and didn't really have a big enough network to be able to call somebody to address some of the issues. So we ended up going with a property manager, hired a big name national firm at first, had a very poor experience there. Always wanted to get our broker, who helped us buy the homes, manage them, because he had a small portfolio of his own that he managed. And after the experience we had, reached out to him again about a year later saying, we're looking to make a change. Do you know of somebody? And he broke down. He said, well, okay, I'll manage these for you. And so 3 of them are single family homes. One of them is a condo. The condo we've maintained management on because it's very light. It's been the same resident since we've been here. So that's very, we're very fortunate for that. But then also the condo association takes care of anything behind the walls. And so aside from some appliances and some plumbing issues, which we call professionals to work on, we're able to handle that management. But yes, we have a property manager for those three, given the distance we have to travel to get to them. And then the rest of them that we have up here in Des Moines, we do self-manage today. And so we utilize property management software, try to be professional about it, offer online payment for rent, listings look professional with a website and things like that. But it is all my wife and I managing them today.
How do you decide? One of the unique things I think about the rental market is it can't be challenging at times. The MLS as it relates to selling a home where there's tons and tons and tons of data. The data is far more fragmented when it comes to single family lease rates. What tools are you using to help hone in on when you're going to put a price on it on a monthly basis? How do you decide to do so?
So the first time after we purchase a home, we generally like to go in, do some renovations, and our bread and butter property is one that was maybe built in the 60s, 70s, hasn't been touched since the 80s, 90s, and could use a refresh on cosmetics and maybe some new cabinets and countertops and flooring and such. When we first bring one of those to market, it can be a little more challenging because it's a question of how do you compare to those few comps that are out there. We generally look at Zillow to see what else is listed. We don't really put any faith in a Zestimate, which is what they assume is your, what should be your rent. Found that it's generally a long ways off from what you ultimately can get. And so we do look at what other landlords are listing for on Zillow, but that's about the extent of that. And then we use Facebook Marketplace to do something very similar. I know that there's services like, I think it's Rentometer or Rentometer. We don't utilize that ever since it became a paid service many years ago. So we started using that, but we haven't for a little while, but I know that's an option. But another thing is we've got a couple of investors locally who own similar number of units that we do, or up to 70 something units. I've kind of built a friendship group out of that. Go to lunch occasionally, have a text chain. We talk to each other about, hey, dealing with this issue today. Anybody ever had to handle this before? Just kind of an investor circle, so to speak. And we all own property kind of in a similar neighborhood of similar type. So that's the other thing is always reach out to that market and provide feedback to that group as well to say, here's what we've rented something similar a few blocks away for, at least up in 3 days. So I might suggest going a little higher, or it took me a month and a half to get that one, an application on that one. You might want to go a little below because I ended up dropping rent and so on. And so it's that communication with others in the market. And then obviously we have our own portfolio now here in the area, and we try to stay to a similar neighborhood. So that way we don't have to do too much driving around to get to all the different properties when necessary. And so we have a little bit of a sense for what our other properties that are similar are renting for, because, we do renovations that are pretty similar across all of our properties because it's just easier when you only have one or two types of flooring to ever have to remember to buy, or one or two types of sinks or faucets or what have you. And you can kind of stockpile materials if you ever need to do any repair to faucets, for example. And so we, again, have a sense for what do our other properties that are similar to this rent for. Single biggest challenge would be, without a doubt, it's finding good tenants, and that we have stricter than what I would say is market on our screening criteria. Obviously, if you apply a screening criteria consistent across all applicants, that's perfectly fine. You cannot obviously say for this person, here's your screening criteria. For that person, here's my screening criteria, right? And so instead, we've taken the approach, because we had our second rental we ever had, we had to do an eviction. Person checked out, fell on hard times, and we did the thing where we allowed them to, next month you'll catch up, and next month you'll catch up, and got pretty far behind and eventually had to deal with that. And ever since then, decided that a couple extra weeks of vacancy on the front end is worth knowing that you've got good people in your units. And so it does require a lot more showings, and does require a lot more application screenings, because you do have a criteria maybe that's a little bit more stringent, but again, it's consistent. And so it has limited the challenges on the other side after somebody's in a unit. We've been very fortunate to have very good people and minor issues there. So I would say that the bigger issue is doing the work up front, which we've tried to focus on, and it worked well for us. And I guess another issue would just be the time component, right? When you're doing this as a nights and weekends job, you're moonlighting as a landlord. A big issue can be, I've got 3 or 4 work meetings this day. I can't just take this day off to go handle an issue or deal with something, or I can't show the property any time of the day because I have to work. So I can only do it at 5:30 or later. And then if a resident is currently in the unit, it's finding that balance of when can I go over there and show it while also not being too disturbing of their time. So that would be the other thing, I think, is just kind of the time management of building a business while also having 40 plus hours a week invested into a day job.
More stringent criteria: income, credit scores, anything else?
So I think if we could only screen on one thing, I think it would be credit score. I think credit score has been the most telling thing because it's kind of an all-inclusive formulaic approach to how responsible a person is with finances, right?
If your credit score is terrible, you make a lot of money, you're still historically proven pretty bad at paying people.
Exactly. And the key is to get paid as a landlord, clearly. And so if they've been able to manage their finances, even on a lesser income, I would take the credit score over any other metric that we screen on. Granted, we screen on credit score. We require 620 minimum FICO score. We have 3 times gross monthly income for the listed rent. We've got requirements about their debt to income ratio that's calculated as payments each month plus rent equals a certain percentage of their income. We have some of the more obvious ones around no prior evictions, no bankruptcies in the last 7 years, and so on. And we put those criteria. This is part of my intent to not show a unit or a home unless it's a likelihood that this person is going to qualify. We set out a list of pre-screening questions that basically ask when they're planning on moving in, how many people are planning on being in the home, do you make at least 3 times a month on the income, and so on. Try to get that response before we'll ever schedule a showing. But once we schedule a showing, the showing meeting that I send out a Google meeting invite to them, so that way it's on their calendar, hope that they won't forget of it. That lists all of our screening criteria right there. So they can screen themselves at that point and tell us, yes, I'm going to qualify if this is a property that I'm interested in, or didn't realize you were going to pay attention to my felony record. So therefore, I see you've got that as one of your screening criteria, and so it's not worth our time. And so have had plenty of potential applicants that have turned themselves away based on seeing our criteria. And, I sometimes think people can try to keep that somewhat not out in the open. But at the same time, for the sake of our time, I want people to know, here's what you have to meet, so that way they don't show up and then they never would have qualified to begin with. And so we do try to kind of pre-screen even prior to conducting a showing, because again, I only can show a couple nights a week. Again, I'm coaching kids baseball and things in the evenings. I don't have enough availability.
Both parties.
I think so.
I mean, who wants to go show up, excited to do business, just to figure out that you could have just told me this? Could have sent me one paragraph before I showed up here to realize that I'm not in the right spot.
Agreed. And I always feel bad. We don't charge an application fee, but there is a background screening check that they have to pay for as part of the application process. And I always feel terrible when they submit their application and there's a glaring obvious issue that I feel like we do everything we can to inform them, don't apply with us if you're not going to meet these criteria. Yet it's very blatant that they do not, and they're out that money. And I just never understood why people don't take a little more time to think about, here's what I have to do to be qualified, and I don't meet those criteria. It's not worth my time to go talk to this potential landlord anyways, because I'm not going to qualify. And so it is unfortunate, but I agree with you. I think it hopefully benefits everybody, and it's just trying to do right by people, because if I was in their shoes, that's what I would want.
2025, what are you most excited about?
Well, it's interesting. Our most recent, we got 30-year fixed rate. So a lot of the rate stuff doesn't affect us as much. But on some of the more recent purchases, I would like to refi down out of the rates we've gotten in the last couple of years, because they seem, high. But rate reset doesn't feel like a likely event anymore. I don't know. Sitting here today, I think the treasuries are down a fair amount. So maybe
as the day we're talking about this, treasuries are down sharply.
Yeah. So maybe there is some refi opportunities in 2025 to improve cash flow without having to do too much new. But I think that there's always an opportunity out there. Doesn't matter the market. For example, the most recent property we purchased, it's on septic. And so I think that concerns a lot of people. And when you look at the numbers and the space of the units and everything, they were great sized units and they were very under rented. And so if you just bring them to market and assume almost nothing else, it becomes a very well cash flowing asset, but it's on septic. And at first I thought, I don't want to be on septic. I like city sewer. But then I realized I grew up on a farm. Like everyone had septic. I was like, what am I scared of? So we ended up going forward with it. And again, the opportunity there was also, in order to qualify as like a 3-bedroom unit, you have to also have not just a closet in a room with an egress window, but you also have to have a septic system that meets of a certain size. Exactly. And the one that was there was only a service 4 total bedrooms. So 2-bedroom units on a duplex. Exactly. And so there's an inspection that has to happen as part of the county's requirements to make the transfer of sale. And it was identified that this system was not adequate to service the property anymore. I had to have a new service or new system put in. So that also created an opportunity for us. We thought, you know what, this has to happen. So the seller was responsible for replacing a like kind system. However, for a slightly larger system that could allow us to, because everything else about the units allowed us to call them 3 bedrooms. We just couldn't based on the septic size. And so we asked the seller, and they were gracious enough to get bids to look at a 4-bedroom and a 6-bedroom system. And we found out that the incremental cost for a 6-bedroom system, if you tried to look at what you could get in rents for a 2-bed versus a 3-bed unit, made a lot of sense for us on a return basis. So we invested the additional to turn them into 3-bed units. So we were able to, with a couple grand, turn 2 1 units into 3 1 units. So that's where the value creation can come in sometimes. And it's not that we expected that to happen. Happened thankfully due to the inspection, but it's those taking advantage of those kind of opportunities. So what I'm saying, what I'm excited for 25, I don't know if there's any one market shift that I'm expecting that I think is a real excitement. And again, we're not somebody that's out there buying up 100 units this year. If the market is in our favor, we're out there buying 1 or 2 until it makes sense. And so I can be very selective, or we can be very selective. And for that reason, I'm not following any particular shift. And I'm just excited for what's that opportunity going to look like in 25, because it feels like every single year there's been something's come up in unexpected places or unexpected times where all of a sudden it's like, that makes sense. We can make this work, and it's creative. And it's kind of fun because you're finding these on the MLS. And a lot of people say, you're never going to find a deal on the MLS. Sometimes just doing a little bit of extra research, asking an extra question or 2, you can find out that there's something there to be done.
If you're a house flipper, execute the burst strategy, or do double closings and are in need of money, Little Guy Loans is your go-to lender here in the Des Moines area. Time is money. Loan approvals in 24 hours. Closings in 5 days. Little Guy Loans was founded by Neil Timmins, an investor just like you. Since he has been in over 10,000 homes in Des Moines, there's never an appraisal. Houses, multifamily, and commercial property loans up to $1 million. Check out www.littleguyloans.com.
For you, why Iowa? You could go anywhere, do this anywhere. Why do you choose to be here?
Yep. My wife and I are both originally from Northwest Iowa, like I said. Kansas City, really enjoyed being in Kansas City. Would probably still be there if it weren't for the fact that all of our family is here in Iowa, and it's the family draw for sure. Nothing can replace your family. And so we enjoyed the opportunity to now be a part of our cousins' birthday parties, or grandpa and grandma's wedding anniversary, or whatever. The things that maybe when we were 6+ hours away, it would have been difficult to justify making a trip back with children who don't want to sit still for that long. But now it's only 3 hours away. And so it's a much easier commitment to go back and spend more time with family. My wife also has a brother and a sister here in town with their families. And so we've actually have family local. And so it's all of the family in regards to that. But also, and I'll be honest, when I went to Kansas City and left Northern Iowa, my first thought was, you know what, I'm sick of the cold. I'm moving south, and did that whole thing that everyone, feels at some point in their life they have to get out of the way. Coming back to Iowa, though, felt like coming home. Like it's hard to describe the difference between being somewhere else where people, even though they're only a few hours away from here, it just feels different than when you're home. And again, being here in Des Moines, being in Iowa, there's a sense of, and I'm sure you hear this from everyone you ask, and I would hope you do because it's true. There's just the people here are good, even if it's a resident who's renting from us, or if it's the people that we're making connections with and networking with. Everyone just seems to have more of a do right by people mentality and I haven't been everywhere, but I do a fair amount of traveling for work. And whether it's that or the short stint in Kansas City, I think it just feels so much more wholesome being here in Iowa. And so we can just build a lifestyle here. And some people want to invest where they can't be at the property, so that way they're not enticed to go take care of that 2 a.m. phone call or whatever. But fortunate to have some ability to do that work with our own hands. Thankful to have the ability to just drive 10, 15 minutes away and go see your property. And so that's another piece of it, is I always want to invest local to where we're living. And I was that for the family reasons.
Are you ready for the final 3 questions?
Absolutely.
2 books that you read that changed your life.
I'm going to skip over Rich Dad Poor Dad because we've already kind of talked about that. And I know that that's like an easy answer. So the other ones, I'm going to say, well, first of all, for sure, the Bible. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong in investing and dealing with people. And there's just a lot of, generational wisdom in there that helps you handle tough situations, period. And so it helps keep you grounded, helps keep you in a good perspective on life. So when tough things happen, you don't let it overwhelm you. And then second is a lesser known book that it's only like 90 pages long. So I read it multiple times a year. It's kind of a motivational tool for me. If I'm ever in one of those situations where I'm feeling like, why do I deal with this? Why do we put up with this? And wouldn't it be easier if we just had weekends to do binge watching Netflix instead of, all these projects. I read it. It's called Rhinoceros Success. And again, it's only 90 pages. I don't even remember the author's name, Scott something. It's a very quick story about basically having a rhinoceros mentality around having 2-inch thick skin and damn the torpedoes and all this. And so it's a great read. I would highly recommend it to anybody who's looking for something that they've never read before and wants to have a little bit of a laugh along the way, because it is also a humorous book. And so that would be the second one that, again, I read regularly to motivate myself.
That's great. No one's ever mentioned it. So fantastic.
And it's quick. Like I said, you can read it in like 3-4 hours. I mean, at the most.
Get one piece of advice for your 20-year-old self.
So when I was 20, that would have been the 07, 08, 09 era. So clearly it would have been, this is as cheap as property is ever going to be in your lifetime, buy it all. And obviously at that age, you don't have the capital to do that, but find a way. But I'm going to skip over that because that, again, is kind of an easy cop-out answer. I'm going to say instead, do what you can to leverage other people's time in a more efficient way. So I think that especially early on, I thought I have this ambition to do it all. I want to know it all. And again, that's great at that age. Like you probably have to have that to get started to begin with. But I kind of took it to a level that got close to burnout. And again, it's all about staying in the game. So I think that, and thankfully we stayed in the game, but there were plenty of times during my 20s-year-old self, right? Because this kind of was a span. We didn't do it all in one foul swoop. Definitely find ways to don't show up to every single maintenance call. Don't do every single, don't do your own accounting just because you think you're a finance major. You should know that stuff. Like hire a professional to take care of that, because there is a lot going on there and it takes a lot of hours to prep all of that. And so just things like that. Find ways to leverage others on the things you're not the best at, or that you would have a better quality of life if you didn't always have to address.
We're cast away on an island for a year. You can only get 3 pieces of data about your business each and every.
So rent collections is a big one. Did everyone pay as expected? If not, obviously there are steps that need to be taken or follow-up notifications that need to be made. So just understanding rent's paid. That's a big one, obviously. Did we have any extraordinary expenses? So, you kind of understand what your mortgage is going to be every month. You understand what your property management fee might be on a property that you have fees on. Did you have to buy some appliances, or did you have to, put a new roof on, et cetera? Because obviously budgeting for those things and understanding how those affect cash flow is important. So I definitely want to know, do we have anything major that all of a sudden now we have to kind of think about? And then I guess, do we have any non-renewals this month? Because that kind of kicks off a whole nother process. And as anybody who's ever handled the full life cycle of a rental knows, the turnover and finding a new resident and working with the current resident to move them out and so on, it's a process. And so there's a lot of work that goes into that, which is why a lot of landlords do their best to maintain good tenants and, don't want to turn them over whenever possible. But just knowing, do we have any non-renewals? Because if the answer is yes, we've got a procedures list that we kind of just follow a checklist that here's our first step, here's our next step, and so on. We got to get that kicked off right away. So that way we can minimize our vacancies, because we do show units when the current resident is still in place. I know some that will wait until it's vacant, but I think that's obviously a lot of vacancy loss then. And so we try our best to show them for the roughly 30 days before an actual vacancy. And again, it creates a little more work. It requires more communication, but at the same time, it's well worth it.
Derek, I've asked lots of questions.
I guess a lot of the questions you've asked are solid. So I would have to think on this one for a little bit. I don't know that everyone has a spouse, but a question that might be worth asking is, how does your spouse involved in the business, and how do you work together, and how do you work through all the differences you inevitably have as you work on these projects together? Because to me, that's as important of a piece to all of this as anything. Is my wife doesn't. We don't see eye to eye on certain things, that can create new challenges that somebody who's maybe investing purely as a business with limited partners or with no partners might not work with. But anybody who's...
Let's dig that. Let's go down that path.
Well, so my wife and I, we work together in the sake that, the real estate thing has always kind of been my passion, less so hers. Again, she married into it, so she didn't necessarily get to boycott it once we got started. But, my focus is on the day-to-day operations and things, and she is able to support, obviously, through the maintaining of the household. We've got 3 kids. I could not imagine how it's possible to do a day job and invest while managing your own properties and still have a family, because, there's so much going on. She's running kids here and there. She's staying with them. She's helping them with their homework or whatever. And so for me, she's like the support at home. She doesn't do as much on the day-to-day stuff, although we do have a short-term rental. And she is involved in that. She will help with the cleanings and the turnover, and she's also my sounding board. A lot of times things are coming up. I don't have the immediate answer. I want to kick the idea off of somebody or bounce the idea off of somebody, so that way I can hear it out loud and can just help me think about it in a different way when I'm not just in front of a computer screen reading the text message or the email that came through, but instead talking it through. Having that partner to just discuss things at a level seam has been hugely beneficial. And obviously, we're 50-50 partners in this. So, her word is, or her thoughts are as important as mine. And so it's a balance. And there's been a lot of times where I'm just so focused on one part of the issue, and then she brings it back out to a broader view to say, well, why aren't you thinking about it this way? And that just creates a new idea for me. And that's all I needed was that new mindset of how to look at the problem. And she helps provide that for sure. And so from support at home to support with ideas and thoughts, and that's the biggest way that she contributes.
But for people who want to,
so I don't have a huge online presence. Never really been huge into social media. I don't have my own website because I'm again, as a nights and weekends kind of a gig. But I do have LinkedIn. So again, just Derek Vander Veen. I work for a company called Grandbridge Real Estate Capital. So if you find that Derek Vander Veen, that's me.
Stick a link below in the show notes. Derek, I sincerely appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the show, may I ask a favor of you? Naturally, subscribe so you never miss an episode. But would you rate and leave an honest written review on Apple Podcasts? It does a lot for us here at the show, and I appreciate reading your thoughts. Great guests make for a great show. If you know of another Iowan who would be a great guest, or you yourself have interest in being a guest, well, get on our radar. Visit Investing in Iowa to fill out an application or recommend a guest. And if you want to connect with me one-on-one, go to LegacyImpactInvestors.com. Click on the Invest With Us button in the top right corner, and there you can pick a time for the two of us to get on the calendar and connect. Until next time, keep investing in Iowa.